The following game has been rated E for everyone by the ESRB. That means that the content in the game is appropriate for anyone aged 6 and up. And while it does not list any specific restrictions or warnings in regards to this specific game, I do know for a fact that it does involve rockets, explosions, and comedy involving rockets and explosions. That means if you are under the appropriate age for the video game, or you feel that this content is not appropriate for you, then you should not be watching this video. You have been warned. Greetings and salutations. I am Outlier, and I bid you welcome to this channel. Joining me today, as usual, are my co-hosts Snowball and Wolf. And today we will be playing Kerbal Space Program. Why? Well, because I feel like it, that's why. It's a game that I've played before on the Xbox. And I am currently playing it now on PC for various reasons. Yes, Snowball, those are the reasons. Anyway, it was made by, well, Wolf, aren't you going to say who the publisher and developer is and when the game was released, at least according to the Steam page? Well, because that's what you always do, because you're the responsible one and I keep forgetting these things? What do you mean, what's in it for you? Fair enough. I got this. Yes, it's a stick. Only if you do what we agreed upon. Thank you. Yeah, you can hold that for now. Save it for after the video. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, Kerbal Space Program. So basically it's a game where you effectively run a space program. It is one of those physics specific games, so its main draw is that all the parts should, in theory, act as they would in real life scenarios. Well, I'm not quite certain all the parts actually exist in real life. I mean, at least as described in the actual game. I'm sure they have some sort of real world counterpart, but I highly doubt something described as an exploding death machine um, doesn't actually exist in real life. At least not with as few safeties as it does in game. No, but that's a gross exaggeration, which you'll find a lot of in the game. Anyway, let us begin. So as I said, I have played this game before, but not on the PC. So it comes with three different, effectively, I guess, not difficulty settings, game modes. We have the sandbox, which in sandbox mode, all parts and features are available from the start. And I'm allowed to play without any restrictions, although R&D and mission control are unavailable. In the science mode, I must gather scientific data to research new technologies. Funding and reputation are disabled and contracts are not available. Previously the classic career mode. Then we have the career mode where you manage all aspects of your space program. Funding, reputation, and science are all active, and contracts are available at mission control. I generally have in the past have played as in the career mode, and that's what I'm going to do. So I jumped ahead of myself. So I can also choose a flag, which is basically a symbol that will appear on everything that, well, all the little parts that I put on my spacecraft to launch them into space. And no, it's not just so that way the launch failure cleanup crew can identify all the parts. Although that is a very good reason as to why everything's labeled. So let's see, what do I want? Well, I forget what I normally go for. I think it's usually this symbol. You know what, I like this symbol. Go with that one. And we also have various difficulty settings. Anyway, it just basically enables and disables various aspects of the game. We'll just keep it on normal for now. Begin! Probably should have played the tutorial. Anyway, so we have a message from Gene Kerman. Everybody has a last name of Kerman. It's like they're all from the same family. Anyway, welcome to the Space Center. Nice to meet you. I'm Gene Kerman, Flight Director, and your guide for this quick introduction. This is the Space Center. From here, you can manage all aspects of your the space program. Feel free to have a look around. Hold the right mouse button to move camera. Use the arrow keys. Right-click over the Space Center facilities to view more about them, and left-click when you're ready to head inside. If you need more information, check out the training section on the main menu. All right, so this is the Kerbal Space Center. Yeah, the Kerbal Space Center, home of the Kerbal Space Program. The reason why you're in this game environment. I'm sure it bears quite a bit to several things that NASA has. I've never been to a NASA facility, so I don't actually know, but we'll say sure, why not? So it has various things involved with the space program. We have the tracking. Well, let's start with the important piece. We have mission control, which gives us the various missions that we need to complete. We'll get to those later. Then we have the space plane hangar, which is one of the two places where I build vehicles. So we have Werner von Kerman. Welcome to the space plane hangar. Hello, I'm Werner von Kerman, Chief Rocketry Engineer. This is spaceplane hangar. Here is where we build spacecraft that later take off from the runway. On your left, you'll find components to construct your spaceplane. Select the starting part and then attach others to it to build. You can then have a look around with the right mouse button or the arrow keys. We just got this place cleaned up, so try not to mess it up too much. We don't talk about those tests. Anyway, if you need more guidance on how to build spacecraft, have a look at the training section on the main menu. So this we won't really be using a lot of, at least initially, because it's for building space planes and other aerodynamic vehicles, which you then launch off of the runway, which is this long line thingy right here. You don't initially have any parts to build a plane, so it's not as important as the vehicle assembly bay or the VAB, which is where you build spacecraft, and which is this thing right here. And I'm assuming you get the same message. So they serve similar functions, just for two different types of craft. For various reasons, back on the console, I would build my actual vehicles in the spaceplane hangar and then move them to the vehicle assembly bay when I would stick a very large rocket to fling them into space. To fling them into space. Anyway, we also have the launch pad where vehicles from the VAB are launched. Yeah, the launch pad is where vehicles from the VAB are launched. Reasonably confident, safe enough distance from everything else, because things like going boom. Scripture for the runway is at the runway. Spacecraft built in the space plane hangar have a long flat surface to reach takeoff speed. Conceivably, such aircraft could even land back on it. Anyway, also we have the tracking station. At the tracking station, all ongoing missions can be viewed and focused. Landing craft can be recovered. Landed craft, really need to read what's there, can be recovered from here as well. So, Gene Kerman, welcome to the tracking station. Hi again. This is a tracking station facility. In here, you can view all of the solar system, as well as the current positions and trajectories of ongoing missions. When you have missions in progress, you'll see them listed on the panel at your left. You'll be able to take command of them from the screen. Sometimes contracts may require specific destinations in orbit or on the surface. Those will be visible here as well. Here. Lastly, if you want to see the same map view during flight, just hit the M key. I'm gonna have to remember that one. Oh, look, they actually posted. No, that's not the Space Center. Desert Airfield, Boomerang Launch Site. Oh, there we are, Kerbal Space Center and Island Airfield. They didn't have these icons listed on the console version, at least not the original console version. They came out with an enhanced version, but they changed all the controls, and I wasn't a fan of it. Yes, there's also that reason too. Moving right along. So those are the primary facilities that I'll use quite a bit in the game. If you have the research, the R&D available to use science to unlock things, then you also need to worry about the research and development. Yeah, we'll just go in a clockwise fashion. As I was saying, in research development, at the R&D facility, our team of science work hard to crunch the data received from mission experiments. Here, all research technologies can be viewed and new ones discovered. So, as I was saying, in certain modes, it said all parts unlocked. You don't need to worry about funding or science. This is what the science is for. So, it basically allows you to unlock shiny new parts for your to build spacecrafts with. So we don't have any science yet, so we can't actually unlock anything. But we do have some basic parts, components to that we can already use. So for instance, we have The basic fin, which is just basically a simple bolt-on aluminum fin that it's basically an airfoil, a small little wing, if you will. The Mark 1 command pad, where the Mark 1 command pod, where basically it's where the astronaut sits and controls the vehicle. We also have the Flea solid fuel booster, which is a monodirectional bomb that when you set it off, it launches your aircraft in hopefully one direction.
Well, then it explodes and goes everywhere.
And we also have the Mystery Goo Containment Unit, which is your first research device. Basically, you would strap it onto the side of your aircraft, of your vehicle, and you use it during missions, and it generates science points. And we have modular girder segment, which is just a structural component. We have a parachute for making certain things get back down to where they need to be without crashing into the ground and exploding. And then we have the Onion Reentry module, which is not something I've ever actually used or seen before. Based off of its name, I'm assuming it allows you to launch from a vessel up in orbit and land back down onto the surface. But it's not something I've ever actually used or played with before, so we may need to experiment with that. And then we have, as you unlock things, you can get more parts. So, like for instance, it's Engineering 101. We have the decoupler, the 2-hot thermometer, the Computron 16, and the Computron 16S, which are various parts I can add to my rocket. We also have basic rocketry, also for 5 science, which gives us the swivel liquid fuel engine, the hammer solid fuel booster, and the FL-T100 fuel tank for the liquid fuel rockets. And then as we continue on, things get more expensive in terms of science, and we're able to get more shiny stuff to play with.
And no, when I say play with, I don't mean explode into fiery death. Although that can happen. Often.
Moving right along. So in addition to all those facilities, we also have the astronaut complex, which is important, but not as well. It's where all your crew members and astronauts live. So you start by default with Jebediah Kerman, one of your pilots, Bill Kerman, an engineer, Bob Kerman, a scientist, and Valentina Kerman, a second pilot. And they all have various stats and experience levels. They gain experience by doing various missions and completing various tasks, and they also have various, how courageous and how stupid they are, which affects various things that can happen to them, I guess. There are 3 roles for each of the crew. Pilot flies the vessel and comes with default SAS abilities. Yeah. And as they increase in level, they gain more abilities, and you can basically give them some automated tasks to help fly the vessel. Engineers capable of repairing broken parts if at all possible. I really should actually read that. So, as I was saying, pilots provide assistance in flying the vessel. Effects are stability assist, the SAS, and full vessel control without ComNet access. And we also have, as I was saying, engineers capable of repairing broken parts if at all possible. The effects are increased resource converter efficiency, increased drill efficiency, and deployed power generation units. I guess their effectiveness increases by 1. The scientists can boost the value of data from science experiments. We have vessel science return plus 100%. Part science return 100%. They can reset experiments. They can run experiments from EVA, and they have an increased 25% science generation rate. And then we also, well, again, she's another pilot. And you can also hire more people if you need more than one engineer or more than 2 pilots, because you get them all killed. Although you can only have a maximum of 5 people currently. You can also, I believe, upgrade. Yeah, with the career mode. Well, the mode that I have it currently set, you can also upgrade facilities, which give you extra effect. They increase their effectiveness and what you can do with them. So, like for the astronaut complex, it currently has a capacity of 5 active Kerbals, and they can only disembark on Kerbin. Whereas if I upgraded it to level 2, I can have 12 active Kerbals. They can perform EVAs, and
An EVA stands for extravehicular activity. Basically, when the ship is in space, they can go outside for a breath of fresh air. Fun, I know.
they can also plant flags. And finally, the last building that we have is the administration building, which has some global effects. So, like for instance, this is where your admin facilities are. We have Mortimer Kerman, who's in charge of the finances. Linus Kerman, who's in charge of the science aspect branch. We have Walt Kerman, who for some reason is in a hazmat suit. He handles public relations. Then we have Gus Kerman, who handles operations. And they have various activities that can give certain global effects to the games. Like fundraising campaign allows you to yields extra funds for each unit of reputation you don't get. Reputation is one of the currencies of the game. You gain it as you complete missions. So you can do like various things. Usually it's less in one stat and more in the other stat. So we can sell, if we have access science, which I never seem to have, we can sell it for funding. Whereas if we run out of funds, we can take a massive reputation hit for more currency. And various things. We may look into this later. So, now that's the entire Kerbal Space Center. So, let's go blow stuff up. We'll start with some missions. So, we have, as I said, various missions to complete. So, we have gather scientific data from the Kerbin World's First Record-Keeping Society, the KWF-RKS.
Just rolls off the tongue.
I'm probably not going to use that acronym, but I digress. So, we need bravery to help achieve our dreams. We still have unchecked items on our list records to break. We'd like to change that. Really, there's no sense in talking about science to be done. Shall we get to it? So basically, I need to complete this one. I basically need to give us a quick crew report before launching. It's fine if any lights control panel are flashing, just give it a swift kick. So basically, I build a vessel, I put it on the launch pad, I stick somebody in the vessel, put it on the launch pad, have them write up a report, and that's complete. Whereas with this one, we basically build the same vessel and launch it. And then the other one that we have, the third mission we have is to escape the atmosphere. So I guess they just basically build. So rather than just launching the vessel, it has to leave the atmosphere, which, if memory serves and if it's still the same as what was in the console, I have to get an altitude of over 70,000 meters, I believe. Yeah, the administration says that legally we cannot call ourselves a space program without actually going into space. Breach the atmosphere by flying a vessel to an altitude of 70,000 meters. Yeah, so Atmos still at the same altitude. And then finally, well, not finally, but the ones that we have is we need to achieve a stable orbit around Kerbin. You need to throw yourself at the ground and miss. So basically, not only do we need to get outside the atmosphere, but we need to go outside the atmosphere going really, really fast. I think its orbit velocity, I believe, is 2 clicks a second. I think. It's been a while since I played this. Alright, so let's start with the basics. We can only have 2 active contracts at this time. Now, if we increase mission control, we can go from having 2 active contracts to 7. And if we upgrade mission control as well as the tracking station, we can also do flight planning as well. Don't know what DNS power is, but it's at 2 Gs. Still over visible on map, and currently in max DNS power is 2 Gs. If we upgrade it, then we have patch conics visible on map, and max DNS power is 50 Gs. We upgrade the VAB, max part supported is 30, then it upgrades to 225, and basic action groups become available. The same with the space plane hangar. Then the launch pad, maximum vehicle size can be 20 meters high by 20 meters, I guess, long by 21.2 meters high, and the maximum weight can be 18 tons. If we upgrade that, it goes, well, even higher. And then with research and development, science limit is 100. We upgrade it, then research science limit is 500. Astronaut complex upgrade required for off-world EVA surface samples, and resource transfer becomes available. And admin building, maximum active strategies is 1, and then maximum commitment is 25%, and as you can see, it upgrades to 3 and 60%.
Yes, I said we're going to blow stuff up. That's what we're going to do. Although technically, if we do it correctly, things blow up in one direction.
So, as always, we need to start with a vehicle pod, which is where the pilot sits. So, we don't have much in the way right now, so it's just basically vehicle pod, rocket, control, robotics, coupling, aerodynamics. We have the fins. These are important for controls. You also have symmetry controls. So rather than, say, placing one part at a time, thusly, we can use symmetry, so that way we make certain that they're lined up, because that is important. As I said, this is physics. Physics plays a large amount into the game, so if you don't have everything matched up correctly, the winds and airspeeds can hit the vessel lopsided, and it can cause it to tilt and explode. So, I like having 8 times symmetry, at least initially, because, well, in my opinion, that just looks cool. So, there's 2 types of rockets, solid fuel and liquid fuel. Liquid fuel requires fuel tanks and can be turned on and off. Solid fuel is basically a monodirectional bomb. Once ignited, it doesn't stop until it runs out of gas. So, since that's the only thing I have, my options are basically it flies, and once it runs out of gas, it stops flying. And to stop it from falling, we should... I'll play with that later. Oh, here we are. We have the parachute. Stick that on top. So, and then we also have what's known as staging, which basically organizes when parts fire. So right now, if we were to basically bring this out to launch pad and set it off, both the parachute and the fuel booster would fire at the same time. Hilarity would ensue, but it wouldn't actually go anywhere, not easily. So for now, we'll just increase the stagings and put the rocket first, so the rocket will launch and then we'll deploy the parachute afterwards.
We'll do that second, okay?
So then we have crew. So these are, as I said, these are the people available in the astronaut facility. We'll have a pilot, Jebediah Kerman, in there. Oh, that's a neat feature. Didn't have that in the console versions. Yeah, now I'm just messing with things. So this button switches between the aircraft hangar, spaceplane hangar, and the vehicle assembly bay. They didn't have that in the original one, so I'm kind of surprised it's there. It is nice. Originally, I would build, as I said, the actual crafts in the hangar and then move them to the vehicle bay, where I would stick a large disposable rocket on them. Or a BADAR, as I like to call it.
BADAR stands for Big Ass Disposable Rocket. Yes, I know I'm not supposed to be saying that word. That's what I get for hiring a censor. Yes, I guess I do need you around. But if you're going to complain, do it in front of the camera. Then I guess things get interesting.
Okay, where was I? Oh yes, vehicle. I believe I have everything correctly. So if we launch, get it to the launch pad. So this is the launch pad. This is the vehicle that we have. And Jebediah is in here somewhere. Here. Yeah, so I can just right click. And what do we need? Control from here. We need this. Crew. Here we go. So one of the jobs required taking a crew report. So crew report from Launchpad. You record the crew's assessment of the situation. So these reports are one of the ways that you generate science. And so doing it right, and different reports from different areas generate more or less science because it's literally on the launch pad. It won't generate much in the way of science, so I'm only going to get 1.5 science points for this report. And there's two ways I can collect scientific experiments and reports. One is by recovering the vessel, which means I get this number of science, and then the other one would be transmitting the report back, which I can't do right now because, well, I probably can because I'm sitting on the pad, but I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't sitting on the pad because it needs a radio transmitter to do so, and I haven't unlocked those yet. Plus, if you transmit the science report, you don't usually get as much science back. Again, you get the full amount here because it is sitting on the launch pad, but were you to, say, do this from orbit, it wouldn't be the full amount. And I can also reset the experiment. Basically, I get rid of the report, or I can keep the experiment. And since I need to keep the experiment, that's what we're going to do. I did accept the contracts, right? Let me revert flight for a quick second. Alright, where was I? Mission control. I guess I didn't accept them. So gather scientific data and launch the first vessel. We also get a small cash boost just for accepting it. So where was I? We didn't save the vessel, so I guess we have to rebuild from scratch. This is going to take 1 second. once I find everything. Also, each piece comes with a cost, so every piece you add increases the cost of the vessel, and you need to have the vessel amount in your bank account, otherwise you're not going to be able to build it. And that there. Our hapless victim, first pilot, Jebediah, is already loaded. Just need to change the stagings around. There we go. And let's launch this again. So, as before, we take the crew report. Which we did. Okay, so we actually have to recover the report in order for that to count. So, the first thing we do is, doesn't turn SAS on, turn SAS on, which is kind of important for going straight up. And that's not what we do. That's flight. That's various flight controls. Ah, there we go.
Staging is the space bar. Yes, I know I should have looked that up first.
So, as you can see with the solid fuel rocket, it's now out, but because this is a physics-based game and we were flying straight up, gravity and air resistance is the only thing affecting the vessel right now. So it's still moving forward at a speed of, well, it was multiple meters per second, but since there's no longer any thrust going out, yes, this is supposed to represent thrust. As I said, air resistance and gravity are slowing it down and pulling it back. So eventually, it'll hit 0 meters per second, and then the altimeter, which is currently at 17,500 meters, will start decreasing. Also, you'll see the directional bit, as you just saw, switch from going forward to going backwards. So now, instead of flying, we are now falling at a rate of 100, well, now almost 200 meters a second. And we are now passing 1,500 meters. And were I to do absolutely nothing, Jebediah, who is seeming to enjoy his ride right now, would crash into the planet and explode in a fiery, fiery death. And at 10,000 meters, the air resistance is enough to flip the thing completely around. So now, instead of falling to his fiery, fiery death, he's now doing it aerodynamically, which means he'll probably be increasing more speed. And we are now passing 5,000 meters, and he's now basically a falling rock, and the parachute is no longer valid.
This is what I get for talking. He is going to die. I expected a bigger boom. Yeah, I guess there was no gas, so... Oopsie. Let's try this again. This time we will do it correctly.
So we reverted the flight because I feel like it. So that's the brakes. I'm going to learn which one fires the SAS. Or which one turns on the SAS. Which hotkey turns on the SAS. We've got to think about what I want to say. So as before, out of gas, but it gets to about over 500 meters a second, which is again enough for us to get to 17,000 meters in altitude. So it's going up, going up, going up. Still going up and going up and going up. And now we're going back down. And Jebediah is once again happy, but that's mainly because he doesn't realize what's going to happen to him.
Like before. Unlike before, we should set off the parachute in time to, well, not get him killed. Again. For the first time.
And he is once again aerodynamically falling. And now we deploy the parachute.
So remember when I said we aren't going to get him killed? I was mistaken. But everything is learning. Try number 3. Try number 3, we will save him.
Once again, SAS on. Fire away. This time we probably shouldn't wait until 5,000 meters before deploying the parachute. I forgot to take the crew report. That almost would have been bad. What do you say? We're flying over Kerbal shores. The shores look inviting, and you watch the waves roll into the coast. Okay, cool. You can see the sky from here. Well, actually, it's not really the sky at this point. No, from a lore aspect, I'm assuming Kerbals naturally live underground. So other than like the occasional airstrip and, of course, the Kerbal Space Center, I've never really seen buildings or cities. No indication that there's actual life on this planet. I've never actually seen trees. Now under 10,000 meters, and we're deploying the parachute now because last time the chute ripped. He was traveling so fast, the chute ripped off, and he died twice. That actually had me worried. So he's getting pretty close. I keep misreading distances. I thought he was closer to the ground than he actually was. And he's down.
He is upside down, but he is alive. This time. This time.
Ooh, controlling the spin. This will probably make him sick. It's actually moving the vessel. And it's now down on its side, and we broke a wing. That's not going to be recoverable. Excuse me. So, remember when I said science generates from the reports based off of where you are? Remember from the first failed flight, the report on the pad would have only generated 1.5 science. But because he was flying, Jebediah was flying at around, I think, 10,000 meters, or he was basically not on the pad anymore when he took his report, it generated even more science. We actually gained 3.5 science. And so, recovery of the vessel surviving the flight gets us an extra 5 science, so we earned 8.5 science. And then these are all the parts that we recovered. The amount that we can recover depends upon how far away from the space center we actually were. Remember, we flopped over and broke a fin, so we're only going to be able to recover 7 fins instead of 8. And we also we're out of solid fuel, so we don't get any funds from that. But we do still have monopropellant left, which gets extra funding. And Jebediah earned 1 experience point. Not enough to go up a level, but
he's now 1 experience point higher than everybody else. So which makes him, the resident idiot, the most experienced member of my team. God help us all. because no one else will care.
Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, mission control. So we've completed these 2 jobs and got extra money from it. So we have more tasks. So the tasks that you're given, I believe, depend upon how far you've gotten along in the game. So originally, it's basically conduct observational surveys, and a lot of these are basically go to some place, do something, and then land safely to get the report. So, like for instance, the focused observational survey of Kerbin is to travel to Manly's Whim, which is a spot somewhere on the planet, and take a crew report in flight above 18,200 meters near this area. I have no idea where Manly's Whim actually is. We go to the tracking center. We'll see that Manly's Whim is actually right there. We also have Milligram's oversight. Oh, that's the Space Center. Site 18D and Area CB-X. So those are various locations for various jobs. So basically, like the one I just described, I also have, as I said, near Milligan's oversight, I have to take a flight crew report below 18,900 meters near this area, and Site 18D, again, take crew report below X amount. And this one has area CB-X below 17 some odd. So, and then this one, those were take a report at a certain height, above or below a certain height, from, while at a certain area. And then we have others where this one is use a certain part at a certain height, but it doesn't have a specific location requirement they have to keep track of. So basically, to complete this one, I basically have to deploy the Mark 16 parachute while on Kerbin and still in the air at an altitude of between 2,000 and 10,000 meters, after be traveling between a speed of 110 meters per second and 300 meters per second. So basically, in order to complete this one, I have to deploy the parachute between within this range while altitude, while between this range of speed. And then this one doesn't have the speed or location requirements. I just basically have to activate the part while landed. So basically, I have to turn on the part while it's launching. And the same for this one. So I could actually, and then we have again, escape the atmosphere, and then more, use this part at a speed, at a certain distance, at a certain speed. Then I have to test the flea while orbiting Kerbin. So I actually have to be in orbit when firing this thing off to complete this one. And this one's just basically orbit Kerbin. And then this one is again, escape the atmosphere. So I could actually technically complete these 2. But I should point out, I need to get the parts first, because I don't have, oh, here we are. So these are the current jobs that I've selected. So I need to test the swivel and the hammer engines while launching from Kerbin, but I don't have either of those engines. I just have the flea. So what we're going to need to do is, I forgot to give you a testing part if you don't actually have the part. So if we go to the vehicle bay, so I now have access to these engines for the purpose of the experiment. However, the liquid fuel engine requires liquid fuel, which isn't stored in the engine. Plus, I have the 5 science required to unlock these things. So these are now unlocked, which means I can now use them all the time. You're right, I forgot about that. I agreed that we were going to send off the rocket and launch the rocket and the parachute at the same time. Thanks for reminding me. And just for fun, we're going to turn SAS on as well. So this is what happens if you fire both. So the parachute deploys, and it causes enough drag to have the rocket start somersaulting.
Now, why the thrust from the rocket doesn't ignite the chute and catch it on fire, I have no idea. The game isn't that in-depth.
It just does. And this is going to take a while, so we are going to increase the warp time. You know what, we're just going to revert flight anyway. So back to the assembly bay. So we no longer need any of these parts. We're going to need the parachute. We're also going to need control module. I forgot what it was called. So we need to test both of these engines. Yes. Yeah. Hammer and swivel. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the fuel tanks. We're going to put fuel tanks on the vessel. Then we are going to put a liquid fuel engine there. And we are going to put 2 hammer engines thusly. Now it looks like a spaceship. I don't have any structural elements. Where are the wings? Here we are. Wings. I guess that kind of works. So, again, we put the stagings different from... We need to test both engines as they're launching, so we can't have... We need to have the engines both in the same stage. We just need to get the parachute off. Let's increase the altitude and the minimum pressure required. Let's leave the minimum pressure alone for now. But we'll increase the altitude with which it deploys at. So, it should be good. It should at the very least satisfy the job requirements. So since we didn't do it before, actually, you know what? Let's revert flight for a quick second. Jebediah took the last flight, so we'll have the Valentina Kerman, who's also a pilot, take this one. That way they can both gain experience. And it's not a case where you can just grind experience. They actually have to do different things. I think they get their second point of experience after they leave the atmosphere, and their third one, I think, when they orbit. And that's really as far as I've gotten this game before, so I would assume when they land on the Mun, which is one of the 2 moons orbiting the planet, go to other planets, do other things, they gain more experience that way. I never got around to that, so... yeah. SAS on.
And yes, I will say that every time. I know you didn't say anything. I'm preempting you from saying things.
And we're off. So, there's a throttle control for the liquid fuel engines. I didn't have it at maximum, so it didn't actually fire the engines. So, the solid fuel thrusters are out. Let's turn on the liquid fuel. See if we can get more altitude. And that's now out. But we've gotten higher than we did before. We're now at 20,000 meters and climbing. Still over 300 meters a second. Still going up and still traveling forward, although speed is decreasing.
Now at 30,000 meters a second, now at 30,000 meters in altitude, with now under 100 meters per second. And now we are falling, but we did get to over 31,000 meters in altitude. Almost halfway to work, almost halfway to space. Valentina seems to be having fun. And why not? Everything is black, and she can't actually see what's going to happen. Because if we don't time it correctly, she, much like Jebediah in his first two attempts, will meet a fiery death. Going straight down. In what is now technically an oddly shaped rock. Alright, so you're now at 500 meters, almost 500 meters a second. I guess the atmosphere is thick enough to give a braking amount. I don't like the fact that the parachute went red for a minute. Now we seem to be fine. Let's deploy that before anything else happens. Like, we increase speed enough that it brakes. And we're good. Parachute's deployed. She is now decelerating to at least a slightly survivable speed. And since it's going to take forever, let's increase the time warp. Because even though it looks like she's close to the ground, and compared to some of the distances we'll get to later in the game, she is relatively close to the ground. She's still over 2.5 kilometers away from the surface. Trusty calculator for a second. So, you see, 25,000 meters times 100 centimeters. So that's 250,000 centimeters divided by 2.5. So that's 100,000 inches divided by 12. So that's 8,333 and 1/3 feet. That's how high she was when the chute deployed, give or take. I don't remember the exact altitude. And she almost lands on top of the VAB. We lost something. We lost the liquid fuel engine. And I just remembered something. I believe we actually go up here to recover the vessel upon mission completion. That's the thing I forgot before. Alright, so recovery of a vessel that, I should actually say mostly survived the flight. We get 0.8 science. As I said, science is given when you do new things in new locations. So the more you repeat something, the less science you actually earn. Jimmy, but I'm at 17.3 science now, so I shall make do. Let's see, we salvaged the command pod, the parachute, 3 fuel tanks, 2 hammer solid fuel boosters, and 2 fins, but not the liquid fuel engine because that exploded. And Valentina has now gained 1 experience point. And so we now have, again, it's basically the same jobs. Conduct focused observational survey. Not easy to do. I mean, it is easy to do. You just got to go to a certain place at a certain height, above or below a certain height, and take a report there. That's not easy to do on something that travels just up and down easily. I'm going to need something that gives me more control surfaces and has the ability to fly for longer than what I currently have to do those. And a couple things. I could probably do this one. I could probably do this one too. I'm not certain I'll be able to be between 110 meters to 300 meters between when I get to an altitude of between 10 kilometers and 2 kilometers, while free falling. Because that's around when I would deploy the parachute. I'm just not certain it will be traveling that slowly at that time. Although, I could probably try making it work. So my current tasks are to use a TD-1200 decoupler at an altitude between 26 kilometers and 29 kilometers, while traveling between the speeds of 109 meters per second and 1,160 meters per second, and then use the Mark 16 parachute between 2,000 meters and 10,000 meters at a speed between 110 meters a second and 300 meters a second. To the VAB. Actually, no what? Forget it. Let's spend the science that I got for more pieces. So this will get me that decoupler, and I'll also have some more sciencey stuff to play with, as well as, so it'll give me the thermometer, which allows me to generate new reports, as well as the Comptron receivers, which will allow me to send science reports back to Kerbal. And then survive, and the tech tree is branching. Forgot to mention that before. So now that I've unlocked Engineering 101, I now have access, once I get 15 science points, I can get survivability, which gives us heat shields, barometer, radiator panels, various landing struts, as well as radial mount parachutes and drogue chutes, which will help slow the craft down, so that way it's safer to deploy the parachutes. And then since I have basic rocketry, general rocketry basically gets me bigger fuel tanks and larger engines. And since I've unlocked both, I also can now unlock stability when I get, again, more science, 18 science, which will get me the aerodynamic nose cone, better fins, and the radial decoupler. Anyway, back to the VAB. So again, gonna need that. That. I'm going to need aerodynamics. These two things here. And then I'm going to need the decoupler. Cargo. Nothing for cargo. Where is structural coupling? So that's the coupler I need to use. And I forgot to put on an engine. So that's the engine we're going to use. Couplers underneath that. Put more fins for stability control. Then underneath the decoupler, we shall have a hammer. Fins. Trying to line that up for helpful things. I say, how come the parachute isn't in the stagings? And I realized there is no parachute. I can never remember where parts are kept. So that's the parachute. So the plan is, because I need to use the decoupler at, I'm not going to get that high with this. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Take you off real quick. More hammer. Yeah, more hammers. When in doubt, more bomb. Well, more explodey death things. One trick I learned is if you're going to make complex things on multiple aspects, what you want to do is build one. Then once you're done with the sub part, you take it off, put the symmetry to what you want for all the sub parts, and then put that there. Okay, that didn't quite work out the way I had planned. There's supposed to be more fins here. Alright, we're just gonna have to do it like that. what? Okay, so I guess that's what we're going to have to do. So, down here, jobs are, so hopefully the 3 solid fuel boosters will be able to get me up to the target height between the target speed where I fire off the decoupler. And then I can use the solid fuel booster as a kind of braking thruster to hopefully get, once I get down low enough, to get the speed within the target altitude for the parachute. Let's try that. Alright, so, as usual, SAS on. Jebediah is in the pilot seat again. I didn't stop to check, but I only have 2 pilots and this is the 3rd flight, so it would be arguably his turn. Launch! Well, that's not planned. Still going up, though. We just won't make the altitude. Just deploy the coupler. And deploy the parachute right now. Because I believe we were in... Yeah, we were within the targets for the parachutes. We just couldn't get the decoupler up high enough. Yeah, and if we take another crew report, we're not going to get any extra science. Keep the report anyway. Lead off speed, as I said, it'll serve as a braking thruster. And the chute is now open, so Jebediah should technically still survive. Getting kind of close to the water. But he lived. I'm not certain anything else did. But at end of day, I only need the astronauts and the science experiments back. I don't get to keep everything else. It's sold to, I guess, the lowest bidder. Crew report flying over Kerbal shores. Recovery vessel flying. Okay, next. Yeah, everything broke except the parachute and the command pod. Yes, I know they technically just polluted the ocean with all that rocket fuel that they still had left. But it's Kerbal Space Program, not Kerbal Ecology Program. That may or may not be a different game in the future. And we're done. And I guess we shall call it a day. I could probably play more, but I'm sure this video is going to be long enough as it is. So, that being said, hope everybody had a good day. Stay safe as far as the plague is concerned, which is, at this time of recording, still running rampant. And, I already said have a good day, so I guess that's it.